Welcome back to Aliyah Yomi. Today we're going to be learning Metzora Shvi, the last Aliyah in Parshas Metzora. This Aliyah is on the topic of summary of the laws of purity. It is a very small Aliyah running from Perek Tesvav Pasuk Chav Tes to Lamed Gimel, a sum total of only 5 psukim. The Torah now reminds us that this is completing the end of the parasha of Zava, a woman who has an unnatural flow, which makes her impure for a day, for the time of their flow, and 7 days after that. And we hear about the korbanos she brings, which are very much similar to the korban of a zav, which we learned about in the 5th aliyah. We then hear about the capstone pasuk in this parasha, which is V'hizartem es b'nei Yisrael mitumasam. It's a hard word to translate, but perhaps we will warn Israel about from this impurity. V'lo yamusu, they should not die b'tumasam when they become impure, but tam omes mishkani asher b'sacham, when they will impurify my sanctuary, which is among them. And then it reminds us of all the different categories: the zav, the shechva zera, the dava benidasa, the zav es zavo for a man or a woman, and all the different applications of tuma and tahara. A few basic questions to think about in this aliyah is: number one, what does the word v'hizartem? This is a crucial word in our aliyah, pasuk lamed aleph. What does it mean? So usually the word azhara means a warning, and that is perhaps, as the Ibn Ezra points out, one possibility is it could mean warning. The trouble with that interpretation is the word as it is spelled here is without an aleph. V'hizartem does not have an aleph in it. It's just hey zayin resh. There is no aleph there. So it could be, as the Ibn Ezra suggests, quoting some medakte kehapshat, those who follow the linguistics, that in fact it does not, the aleph was dropped. But that Ibn Ezra says that's very unusual. There are times where certain letters are dropped. Nun's at the beginning of words, hay's at the end of words, but an aleph in the middle is not, is not the way that it really works. This is unusual, says the Ibn Ezra. So the possibility that Ibn Ezra suggests rather is that maybe it comes from the word nazir. Nazir means to be distant, like a Nazir separates himself. Israel should separate themselves from impurity. A third possibility is suggested by the Bechor Shor. The Bechor Shor suggests that it comes to the word zarus, which means strange. It says that the Bnei Israel should estrange themselves. They should make it foreign to them, in order to distance themselves, in order to be completely disconnected from impurity. So whether it be as the Bnei Israel are warned, Bnei Israel are separate, or Bnei Israel are, in a certain sense, estranged from impurity. That's what's at stake over here. Now, what is the punishment over here? We hear that Hashem says, don't do this in order that you do not die. What kind of death is this referring to? So the Gur Aryeh, the Maharal, in his commentary on Rashi on the Torah, points out that there really are two different types of called heavenly deaths that could, God forbid, be decreed upon a person. One is Misa Bidei Shemaim, death in heaven's hands, and the other one is Kares, which is being cut off. And he points out that both of them are premature death of natural causes, or Hashem will take care that the person does not reach their full capacity. But the difference is that Kares, which is being excommunicated, will also, in fact, involve their children also dying prematurely as well, which is a very, very severe punishment. And he points out that actually what we're talking about over here is Kares, is being cut off, and that's a very significant concern. If a person is in a state of impurity and then engages in being with purity. So the question is, what is it that a person does? What is the warning here in our parsha? So the most basic way of understanding this, and this is Rav Yosef Bechor Shor explains this, but this is the basic reading of this aliyah, is that these impurities are disgusting things. They're spiritually, there's a certain element that we're trying to avoid this. Some of them are things that we bring upon ourselves through our actions. Some of them are natural bodily functions. And in that sense, that it's not that we chose or it's bad, but there is a state of purity that we need to move away from, that void created by the state of impurity. And the most significant piece over here is that in such a state, we are disallowed from engaging in anything which is Kaddish, which is holy. So that would mean to say that a person who is in a state of impurity, whether voluntarily or just simply involuntarily, and they come into the Mishkan, they come into the Beis Hamikdash in such a state, knowingly, or they touch something which is holy, they eat something which is holy, kodshim kalim, truma if that person is a kohen. In such an instance, that person would therefore perhaps get this terrible spiritual punishment for being in such a state. However, the Rabbeinu Bechaya quotes the Gemara in Shavuos Yud Ches Amud Aleph, which famously says that what's being talked about over here is, generally speaking, making gedarim, making siyagim, fences around areas of purity and impurity. So the example the Gemara gives is the halacha, which we know is what's called prisha samuch leveses, which means to say that in the menstrual cycle, there are specific days which have a higher propensity to be the time when the menstrual cycle will begin, and at that point in time there is a issur of a husband and wife being together at that time for that period, whether it be 12 hours or 24 hours, depending on which of the vestos, which of these days it is. That's what's called prisha samuch leveses, not getting involved in something which could have very high stakes errors. And that's around this time. So if that's the case, as the Gemara says, how does that relate to the words in our pasuk which talk about v'tamam is mishkani asher b'sacham, when impurifying my mishkan, my sanctuary? So the Baruch She'amar, that's the Torah Tamima, the Rav Epstein points out in his footnotes on this, on quoting this Gemara in Shavuos, that we know that when a marriage works well, when a marriage is worked on by both sides, and everybody is working to make this a place not just of emotional safety but also spiritual building, then really Hashem's presence is found in that marriage as well. It's not simply a physical union, it's not simply a functional financial partnership, it is a spiritual building. Hashem's Shekhinah is there, and therefore Hashem is saying, if you need to treat that relationship with the utmost care in terms of sanctity, in terms of purity. And that's why you have to be very, very careful not to bring impurity into this, and that's why that's called the Mishkan. Hashem's Mishkan is in every marriage. The Netziv, Rav Natali Tzili Yehuda Berlin, has a different perspective, and he says that it refers to our bodies. Our body is the sanctuary. Bilvavi Mishkan Evne, that in a certain sense our body is a micro Mishkan. Hashem says that you should build a Mishkan, v'asul migdash v'shachanti b'sacham, I'll dwell in every one of you. And if I dwell in every one of you, says Hashem, then treat your body, treat the way that you interact with the world in a very careful way. If you're in a state of impurity, don't violate that impurity by entering a place of holiness or bringing something holy into you, eating something which is holy while a person is in a state of impurity. That's what's being talked about over here as well. There are other applications of this pasuk as well. So, for instance, the Gemara in Moed Katan Daf Hey and what Allah tells us that there's a very important responsibility of the community of the Beis Din, that Metzora says that it refers to the fact that we have to make clear boundaries for graveyards. So that means to say that if there's a burial, or let's say there's a body which is buried, burial grounds or cemetery, that Beis Din have the responsibility of Metzora and Zakfaros, to make a indicator that there is a grave there, so that Kohanim will not make a mistake, or people eating something which is holy will not make a mistake and go over that area and therefore be in a state of impurity. So this is a responsibility of the community, which has many applications as well. Finally, worthwhile concluding with a very beautiful thought which is brought in the Torah's Kohanim, which is the Medrash Halacha here at the end of the parasha, and the Medrash says, Milamed. What does it mean, B'tamam es mishkani, when they make my mishkan, my sanctuary, impure? Milamed, this teaches us, she'af al pi shehem tameim, shechina b'neihem. The lesson that we learn over here is that even though the Bnei Yisrael are impure, Hashem says, I will still reside among you. It says Hashem, need them to be careful about my mishkan, but even when they do impurify it, I will still reside among them. The Shekhinah, the Mishkan, is still amongst them, even b'toich tumasam, even in their impurity. With this, we conclude the last aliyah of Metzora and the parasha as a whole. In the meantime, have a wonderful, meaningful day and a beautiful Shabbos.